Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. I had a lot of requests to do a tutorial for this cute kitten that I painted the other day. I'm going to start off by sketching with a pencil onto some watercolor paper. All the supplies I'm using today were from a watercolor kit from the brand Pagos. I'll link it down below, and I'll have a review on this set coming up in a few days, maybe a week or two. But bottom line, I do recommend this kit as a whole, and you'll get to see how it performs here in this video today. This paint was sent to me for free. I am not being paid to do this video, but I just wanted to let you know in case you think that might influence my opinion of the paints. So I'm sketching on, and this pencil was in the kit as well as the eraser, onto this paper. And the inspiration to paint this cat was actually completely random. I didn't know what I wanted to paint, but I wanted to try out these paints. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure how they would perform. They're a very inexpensive set of paints. So I went to this website that I use frequently for reference photos called Unsplash, and I just started typing random letters into the search bar, and the word cat popped up. So I clicked on it, and I saw a cute photo of this orange cat kind of laying in the sun, shielding his eyes, and I thought, that's adorable. I'm just going to paint that. If it comes out great, wonderful. If it doesn't, I haven't spent a lot of time planning it, and I won't feel too precious about it or worried about it coming out well. So if you're like trying some new media, if you are kind of nervous about how it's going to turn out, don't paint something precious. Don't paint a portrait of your kid or your own pet. Paint something random that you can just have fun with and not feel a bunch of consequences if it doesn't turn out right. So my first step when I'm doing a painting that I know I want a background in is to do a wet and wet background. So I wet the entire paper, not just the background. And the reason for that is I don't want hard, awkward edges anywhere. So even though I'm pretty much just putting paint in the background at this point, I didn't want to have this kind of like cut and paste edge between the cat and the background. And now I'm going in with some yellow ochre, and I'm kind of tinting the cat, because the cat is a kind of a yellow tiger cat, I would say, with long fur, but it's like that tiger coloring. And I wanted to get something kind of everywhere on the paper. Now I did leave it a little bit lighter on the face and towards the bottom of the fur, just to kind of give it a little bit of contrast between the background. And I will end up darkening the background. So I do want to let you know that you don't have to have it perfect. Try to get your background in as accurately as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect. You can darken it up later. It's better to be a little light than too dark. But that too dark generally doesn't happen with those first washes, because you don't have a reference point yet. You don't have your darkest darks in, so you tend to go a little light anyway. So I wouldn't even worry about it. But you'll be able to see how I darken that up in a little bit. So hopefully that will help you from being afraid to put that background in on your painting. Now at this stage, a painting is actually, the paper's a little damp still. So when the paper's damp, I'm still layering up, I'm still adding. And you're probably thinking, Lindsay, how are you not getting blossoms and cauliflowers on your painting if you're painting on damp paper? And here is the trick to avoiding getting cauliflowers and blossoms on your paper when it's damp. You want your brush to be drier than the paper. You want the paint in your brush to be kind of pasty. You want it to be less wet than what's on the paper. If your brush is more wet than what's on the paper, that's when you get the cauliflowers, because you create a big puddle in an area of the paper that's starting to dry, and that water pushes all that pigment to the edge. So you got to make sure you don't have more water in your brush than what's on the paper. I hope that makes sense, but that makes it so that you can control where your paint goes, and you can concentrate shadows here and there, but get that soft, natural looking edge. Okay, I'm not doing like sharp details at this point. I'm just putting in like the stripes that I want to kind of blur out at the edges a little bit. And that way I'm going to have stuff that's super blurry, like in the background. And then I'm going to have stuff that's moderately blurry, like in the midground. And then when it dries and I'm putting in those finer details of the sharp stuff that's coming into focus more in the foreground, and it will give us a lot more depth in our picture, even though this is a pretty shallow depth of field painting. It's a close-up of a cat laying on the floor. So it's not going to have a ton of depth. So you really want to make sure that you can capture all of those levels of blur to get that pretty kind of what's the word I want to say, like three-dimensional feel and texture that like a fluffy cat would have. And things are drying up more, so I can have more crisp areas. And as I want crisper areas, I will switch to smaller brushes. Now the brushes that came in the set, it came with a water brush, which we're not using in this, but it came with 4 other brushes. It came with a number 6 round, which I'm using here, and it came with like a, I think it was like a number 1 round, and the cat's tongue brush is what I used for like the preliminary part of this painting. And it also had a flat, and I do think I did use a flat later on in this, but all the brushes were really nice quality. They were golden Taklon, and they held the paint well. They were good brushes. They're not as soft as, say, your faux squirrels or natural hair brushes, but they're a good brush. Now here I am tapping in dots in a line for the area where the whiskers are going to come out. I think that's a really important feature to get on an animal with whiskers because it just makes it look more realistic. And I'm also flicking in little furs, and I'm still using that number 6 round. I don't switch to my smaller brushes until I have to because I will get a greater range of brush strokes and of line widths. And also, if you get used to getting details with a larger brush, you're going to be a better painter because you're going to have better control. Now, I apologize for my hand being in the way, but the reason it is because if you want those fine strokes, and you want good brush control, you want to hold your brush at a 90-degree angle with the paper. That's going to give you more control than any other way. Now, if you want a wider swath of color, using it at a steep or more acute angle is going to give you a wider band of color when you stroke your brush across. But when you're trying to get those furs, you're trying to get those little details, being at a 90-degree angle is really going to help you get that brush control. Now I'm still using that same brush and going in with some darker colors, and my paper is fairly dry at this point, and I'm just trying to kind of get those darker tones in there. Now at this point I'm realizing that my background is way too light, so I am going to need to add another layer, but it's not going to give me that cut and paste look because we already put that first unifying wash down at the beginning. So I started off with just some more of that turquoise that I originally had laid down to see if that would be dark enough on its own, and I realized that it wasn't, and I needed to darken it. Now with this set of paints, I will say I did try mixing a dark with the ultramarine blue and the brown that I was using, but the ultramarine blue is too weak in this set. That's the only real downside to this set, I would say. So I did use black. I mixed black in with the turquoise, and their black is actually nice and transparent and pure, so it really tinted that well and or shaded it well and created the shadow that I was after. So if that happens, especially if you have a budget set of paints, these are very affordable. The full set with everything, 4 brushes, then a water brush, pencil, gel pen, black pen, pad of paper. I mean, it's only $34 and 36 watercolors in a big metal tin. So it's an economy set of paint. So sometimes your mixes are not going to be as strong as you want because they do bulk out those paints with fillers to make them go a little further. It didn't really become an issue except for with the ultramarine, mixing it to make a dark color. So I just went in with black and it worked fine. I also darkened the far background that's behind the cat as well, using I think I used like a sap green and the black just to kind of deepen it and push it back. I really want the cat to stand out, and I'm intensifying the pink in the ears just by going over with another layer. And at this point I liked it pretty well, but I was curious as to how the white would work in this set. Now it is a mixing white, it's not an opaque white, but I thought this might do just the trick for catching the sunlight on the fur, because sunlight tends to be cooler in temperature. I know we probably think, well, a cat laying in the warm sun, that's going to be warm in color. It's actually cool. Natural light has a cooler temperature than, say, incandescent bulb. It's like a regular old lamp bulb. So having that white that's kind of cooler in tone, it probably has some optical brighteners in it to make it look whiter. But it does kind of read as a cooler toned white on the paper. So I just kind of put that in anywhere the light would be kind of brushing the fur. And I'm just kind of, you can see, stamping it in there with that flat brush. There's a lot of white fur in the ears too, but I thought a gel pen would be better for that, so that's what I'm using. This also came in the kit. It's a 1mm, I would say, tip gel pen, and I'm flicking the pen pretty quickly so that I can get a broken fine line so it will look more natural. Now if you do use this at a moderate pace, like on some cardstock, you'll get a solid line, but when I'm doing things like whiskers and fur, I want more of a thin, natural looking line, so I'm going fast so I can get a smoother flick from my wrist and get a more natural looking whisker. So that's why you see that broken line. That was just a kind of a technique, but the pen will write smoothly otherwise. And I'm just kind of adding in any other little details, any other little furs, any place where I need to adjust things. I'm going to do that now. Like I thought the head was a little too high, so I'm bringing in the background a little bit to push the ear and the top of the head back smaller a little bit. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to change something that's not quite right. And some of the white looked a little too bright to me, so I'm using some yellow ochre and just kind of adding some flicks in the direction of the hair over areas where I thought it was just a little too bright. I'm also adjusting the shadows here. I'm using some of the gorgeous brown. There are 3 gorgeous browns. This one is almost like a transparent brown oxide. It reminds me of Core's transparent brown, actually. It's such a beautiful color, and you can mix it with black and get a nice rich deep dark. And I'm just going in and just kind of adding gesture strokes and, you know, shadows in between the fur, and just trying to get those last bits of, you know, character that I wanted in the picture. And after drying it with my heat tool, I'm taking the tape off, and that's kind of a tip if you're worried your tape might rip the paper. Hit it with a heat tool or a hairdryer, and it loosens the adhesive so it comes off easily. I didn't have any issues with this paper. It's actually pretty nice paper, especially considering it was in this inexpensive art set. And here I am just going in with that small brush that I told you was in the kit. I think it's a number 1 round. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than that. And just putting in any fine little details. I like to go with smaller brushes as I finish a painting so I don't put too much paint down and drastically change anything. But there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you give something like this a try for yourself. I'll have all the supplies linked down below, and thank you so much for watching. Till next time, happy crafting.